Science Chomp. Today we're going to be looking at the Paleozoic Era. Now, in case you've forgotten, the Paleozoic Era is this era here, and it's the first era of the Phanerozoic Eon, and this is the eon that we are currently in. Okay, so let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. Now, as you can see, according to this time scale, the Paleozoic era lasted for 291 million years. So that's a long, long time. And it's divided into 6 different periods. Now, you will have to memorize the names of these periods in your exam. So best of luck with that. But anyway, so what is the Paleozoic era all about? Paleo is ancient and zoe means life. And so this period, this era is all about ancient life. And because it was so big, it's divided up into 6 periods, and you can group them 2 periods apiece. So you've got the early Paleozoic, which is these 2, then the middle Paleozoic, which are these 2 here, and then the late Paleozoic, which are those 2 up there. So anyway, you may be wondering, how are we going to remember all of these names? So we've got the Cambrian, the Ordovician, the Silurian, the Devonian, the Carboniferous, and the Permian. Okay, well, luckily for you, I've come up with a mnemonic sentence. So mnemonic sentence is just a sentence where all of the letters of the first words, all of the first letters of each of the words stands for something. So let's have a look. Cambridge orders stealing Devon's carbon permanently, right? Cambridge is a place, Devon is a place, so the people of Cambridge order the stealing of Devon's carbon permanently, right? So if you remember all of this, like for example, if I was to say, who ordered the stealing, it would be Cambridge. What did Cambridge want stolen? Was Devon's carbon. For how long? Permanently. So just remember this mnemonic sentence. Cambridge orders stealing Devon's carbon permanently. And you'll notice this is Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian. So it all fits quite nicely. So try to remember that. It will help you. Early Paleozoic era, so it's the Cambrian and the Ordovician, is known as the age of the invertebrates. Invertebrates are organisms without backbone, so these would typically be things like worms, insects, bugs, that kind of thing. But back in the early Paleozoic, these were marine invertebrates, so things like shrimp. We've got a couple of pictures of those things here. And if you have a look at these are the types of invertebrates that we had. So these are organisms without backbone. So this is in the Cambrian and the Ordovician. That thing came a little bit later. Okay, in the early Paleozoic, you had the Earth looking a little bit like this. The climate was warm, and there are lots of shallow inland seas. Okay. The middle Paleozoic we called the age of the fishes. Now what's interesting is the plural of fish is fish, but here we say fishes because we're talking about different types of fish. Okay, so if you went fishing and you caught like 10 salmon, you would have caught 10 fish. However, if you caught a salmon, a trout, a shark, and a whale, that would be different types of fishes, and a mammal. Whale being a mammal. Okay, so the middle Paleozoic is the age of fishes. And on land, you had insects evolving, and the first multicellular plants appeared as well in the middle Paleozoic. Also, what happened in the middle Paleozoic was you ended up with mountain ranges forming. And the one mentioned in the book is the Appalachian mountain range in North America. So these are formed back in the middle Paleozoic, and they're also much taller back then. So due to weathering and erosion, they've gotten a little bit shorter. So the Middle Paleozoic, if you go back, is talking about your Silurian and the Devonian. These refer to the Middle Paleozoic. And finally, we've got the Late Paleozoic, and the Late Paleozoic is the age of the amphibians. So amphibians are organisms that kind of live part of their life on land and part of it in the water. So they go to the water to mate and to lay eggs. And the adaptations that amphibians have are that they have lungs, thick, moist skin, and strong limbs so they can crawl out of the water and onto the land. Other examples of amphibians are things like frogs, but here we have this thing called a Tiktaalik. So a Tiktaalik was an early amphibians. Frogs, they came later. Okay. Continuing with the Late Paleozoic, we had these things called coal swamps. Okay, now because the earth was kind of warm, you had like lots of tropical forests and swamps. And when these trees died, what they'd do is they'd fall over and they'd sink into the swamp. And because it was oxygen poor, over time, these trees and plants turned into coal. Okay, and most of the coal that we use today came from the Carboniferous and Permian periods, basically the Late Paleozoic era. Okay, Pangaea also formed back then, and this was the supercontinent that formed at the end, or in the Late Paleozoic. Okay, the coal swamps, they dried up, and the climate became much cooler and drier as well. And you can identify some of the modern continents that we have over here. Now, at the very end of the Late Paleozoic, we had something called a mass extinction. But before we get into that, I forgot to mention that at the end of each of at the end of the early, at the end of the middle, we also had mass extinction events going on there as well. So just bear that in mind. At the end of the early Paleozoic, we had a mass extinction. At the end of the Middle Paleozoic, we had a mass extinction. And at the end of the Late Paleozoic, we had a huge mass extinction. So this is the largest mass extinction in the history of Earth. Now, to put into perspective, 95% of marine life died out, and 70% of life on land became extinct as well. This guy, Thanos, when he clicked his fingers, 50% of the organisms on Earth died. That's nothing compared to the Permian mass extinction, where a hell of a lot more died. So you have to wonder, well, why did they die? Well, ultimately, there was very rapid climate change. Could be due to a volcano, could be due to meteorites. And what that would have done is it would have blocked out the sun, which would have killed plants. As a result, plant eaters, they died, and as a result, animals that ate those died as well. So entire food webs collapsed because of climate change. And that's it. That's the Paleozoic era.